June 1942. 6 months after the shock of Pearl Harbor, the United States is still absorbing the reality of a war that arrived without warning. Across the Pacific, the Japanese Empire appears unstoppable. From Southeast Asia to the Central Pacific, its navy has moved with precision and confidence, seizing territory, controlling sea lanes, and projecting power across thousands of miles of open ocean. Many military observers at the time believed America was on the defensive for years to come. The balance of power seemed firmly tilted, and yet, in the vast emptiness north of Hawaii, near a tiny coral atoll called Midway, events were already unfolding that would challenge that assumption. What happened there over 4 days would redefine naval warfare, shift the strategic momentum of World War II, and prove that information can be more powerful than intimidation. The Battle of Midway was not simply another clash of fleets. It was a contest of intelligence, timing, leadership, and calculated risk. 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, veterans of the attack on Pearl Harbor, sailed with the expectation of delivering a decisive blow. Waiting for them, beyond the horizon, were 3 American carriers positioned not by chance, but by code-breaking. U.S. naval intelligence had deciphered key elements of Japan's operational plans. Instead of reacting to Japanese moves, the United States anticipated them. This single advantage changed everything. For the first time in the Pacific War, American commanders were not guessing. They were preparing. Under the steady leadership of Admiral Chester Nimitz, difficult choices were made. Damaged ships were rushed back into service. Pilots were briefed under conditions of uncertainty. Commanders were told to trust initiative over rigid structure. It was a moment that tested the American military system at every level, from cryptanalysts working in dimly lit rooms in Hawaii, to flight deck crews preparing. Aircraft in rolling seas, Midway also marked the definitive rise of the aircraft carrier as the dominant instrument of naval power. Battleships, once the ultimate symbol of maritime supremacy, could not strike targets hundreds of miles away. Carriers could. At Midway, opposing fleets never saw each other directly. The battle was decided in the sky, by aircraft launched from ships over the horizon. Within hours, the strategic balance shifted. Japan lost 4 frontline carriers and many experienced aviators it could not easily replace. The United States suffered losses as well, but retained something far more important: industrial capacity, adaptability, and the initiative. For America, Midway proved a defining principle. A nation can absorb a devastating surprise and respond with discipline, innovation, and resilience. It demonstrated that intelligence, logistics, and calm decision-making under pressure can overcome numerical disadvantage. In many ways, the lessons of Midway still shape modern U.S. military doctrine. In today's Indo-Pacific environment, where carrier strike groups patrol contested waters and information warfare defines strategic competition, the echoes of June 1942 remain unmistakable. Midway was more than a turning point in a global conflict. It was the moment the Pacific War changed direction, and in changing that direction, it helped determine the balance of power for the modern world. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor did more than damage ships in harbor. It shattered a sense of geographic security that many Americans believed the Pacific Ocean guaranteed. In a matter of hours, the United States was thrust fully into a global war. What followed in the early months of 1942 was a rapid and disciplined expansion by Imperial Japan. Guam fell. Wake Island was overtaken. The Philippines endured relentless pressure across Southeast Asia and into the Dutch East Indies. Japanese forces advanced with coordination and speed that impressed even their adversaries. For a time, it appeared that Japan held the initiative everywhere that mattered in the Pacific. At the center of this strategy stood Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, a complex and calculating naval leader. Educated in part in the United States, including time at Harvard, Yamamoto understood American industry, culture, and economic capacity better than many of his contemporaries. He knew that if the war dragged on, America's manufacturing strength could overwhelm Japan's resources. In his view, the only viable path was to deliver a decisive blow early, one so damaging that Washington might reconsider a prolonged conflict. That thinking shaped Pearl Harbor, and it shaped what came next. His next objective was Midway Atoll, a small but strategically critical outpost roughly halfway between Asia and North America. On a map, Midway looks insignificant, but strategically, it was a forward shield for Hawaii and a potential launch point for deeper operations into the Central Pacific. If Japan seized Midway, it could extend its defensive perimeter, threaten American positions, and possibly compel the U.S. Navy into a decisive confrontation under unfavorable conditions. Control of Midway meant leverage, and in war, leverage often matters more than territory. But here is where the story becomes, in my view, a powerful example of American intellectual resilience. Japan believed it was executing a carefully guarded plan, yet in quiet rooms at Station HYPO in Hawaii, American cryptanalysts were methodically breaking portions of Japan's naval code. These were not dramatic battlefield moments. They were long hours of analysis, pattern recognition, and disciplined thinking. And they worked. U.S. intelligence determined that the coded objective labeled AF referred to Midway, under Admiral Chester W. Nimitz. This information was not wasted. Nimitz faced a difficult decision. His carrier force was limited. The U.S. Navy was still recovering from Pearl Harbor. Retreat was an option. Caution would have been understandable. Instead, he chose calculated risk. He ordered the carriers USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and the heavily damaged but rapidly repaired USS Yorktown back into position to intercept the Japanese fleet. What I find most remarkable about this moment is not simply the courage involved, but the confidence and knowledge. America would fight outnumbered, yes, but not uninformed. That distinction is critical. This was not recklessness. It was preparation, guided by intelligence. It was a demonstration that, in modern warfare, understanding the enemy's plan can outweigh numerical disadvantage. For students of history, Midway's prelude teaches an enduring lesson. Wars are not won only by ships, aircraft, or firepower. They are shaped by minds, by analysts, by strategists, by leaders willing to act decisively when the data supports action. In June 1942, the United States proved that even after a devastating surprise, it could adapt, think, and respond with clarity. And that intellectual confidence would soon change the course of the Pacific War. But Japan had a problem, and it was invisible. While imperial planners believed their Midway operation was concealed behind layers of complex naval codes, a quiet battle was unfolding thousands of miles away in Hawaii. Inside the basement of a modest building at Pearl Harbor, American cryptanalysts at Station HYPO were piecing together fragments of intercepted communications. There were no headlines about their work, no dramatic announcements, just disciplined analysis, intuition built from months of study, and an unshakable belief that information could change outcomes. They were right. By late May 1942, U.S. intelligence officers had strong evidence that the Japanese objective designated as AF referred to Midway Atoll to confirm it. American commanders executed a subtle deception, transmitting an unencrypted message that Midway was experiencing a water shortage. Soon after, Japanese communications referenced AF having water problems. The code was cracked. The target was confirmed. This moment is one of the most important turning points of the Pacific War, and it happened before a single aircraft launched. Under Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, the United States now possessed something rare in wartime: strategic foresight. Nimitz understood the stakes. His available carrier force was limited. The Navy was still recovering from Pearl Harbor. On paper, Japan held the advantage in numbers and recent victories. Retreat would have been defensible. Delay would have been understandable. Instead, Nimitz chose calculated risk. He ordered the USS Enterprise and USS Hornet into position northeast of Midway. Most remarkably, he pushed the damaged USS Yorktown, heavily struck weeks earlier in the Coral Sea, through emergency repairs in record time, returning her to combat readiness when Japan believed she was sunk. America would not meet the Japanese fleet by accident. It would wait, positioned deliberately, informed by intelligence, and guided by strategic patience. Outnumbered, yes, but not unaware. This was not simply a military maneuver. It was a demonstration of confidence in analysis, in leadership, and in the ability of a free society to adapt under pressure. The rising tension before Midway was not only about ships moving across the Pacific, it was about whether knowledge could overcome momentum, and in that quiet advantage, the balance of the war was already beginning to shift. The outcome of Midway was not just a military result recorded in history books, it was a psychological turning point for an entire nation. In June of 1942, when the smoke cleared over the Pacific, Japanese expansion had been decisively halted. The momentum that had carried imperial forces across thousands of miles of ocean was broken. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, Americans could look at the map and see something different. Not retreat, not uncertainty, but reversal. Midway made the Guadalcanal campaign possible. It gave the United States breathing room, strategic space to regroup, rebuild, and then move forward with confidence. And perhaps just as important, it restored American morale. After December 7th, doubt had lingered in quiet corners of the country. Could the U.S. Navy recover? Could American industry mobilize fast enough? Could leadership rise to the moment? Midway answered those questions with clarity. It proved that intelligence, preparation, and disciplined courage could overcome numerical disadvantage. It showed that even when outnumbered, Americans could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast an adversary. This was not victory through chance. It was victory through readiness, through teamwork, through belief in the system. Strategically, Midway ensured that the Pacific would not become a permanently contested Japanese sphere of influence. Instead, it became the arena for an American counteroffensive, one that would move methodically across the ocean, island by island, culminating in 1945 with the end of the war. From that point forward, Japan was forced onto the defensive. The initiative had shifted, and with it, the trajectory of the conflict. And when we talk about lessons for modern power, Midway speaks clearly across generations. First, intelligence wins wars. Long before satellites, cyber capabilities, and real-time surveillance, American codebreakers altered the course of history with pencils, radios, and relentless focus. Knowledge created advantage. Second, adaptability matters more than numbers. Admiral Spruance's calm decision-making under uncertainty reflects what we now call mission command, empowering leaders to act decisively within strategic intent. Flexibility, not rigidity, created opportunity. Third, industrial strength is strategic power. The United States could replace ships, aircraft, and trained crews at a scale Japan simply could not match. Economic capacity translated directly into battlefield resilience. And fourth, technology shifts doctrine. Midway confirmed that the aircraft carrier, not the battleship, would define naval dominance. Control of the skies meant control of the sea. Today, in the Indo-Pacific, American carrier strike groups patrol contested waters. Surveillance networks monitor vast distances. Alliances reinforce stability. The strategic foundations visible in 1942 remain embedded in doctrine. Today, Midway is not distant history. It is living doctrine. It is proof of American resilience. It is a reminder that patriotism is not just emotion, it is preparation, discipline, and unity under pressure. And when Americans study Midway, they are not just revisiting a battle. They are witnessing the moment Their nation seized back the initiative and never let it go.